Well, hello everyone. Welcome to WOW Live, Word on Wednesdays Live, the 15th day of the month, right smack dab in the middle of the month of July. Hard to believe, even with this shutdown and everything, where does the time go? It's quite amazing. Hey, just to switch things up here and give you a little chit-chat, I have an announcement to make. We're excited about this. We've been having some children show up in the services with their parents, grandparents, and so forth, and it's been going rather well. There's quite a number of kids showing up, and so we want to get junior church underway. It's going to begin again this Sunday, as a matter of fact. Sherry Myers was just talking with her, and she's all ready to go. She's excited about it, and so that's kind of a new development in our getting back to church schedule, so to speak. And so Sunday, July the 19th, this coming Sunday, we're going to have junior church. We're talking about age groups. There's really no official age. There might be something written down somewhere, but it's been something for children in school age. Wouldn't say anybody older than 12 to attend, but school age kids up to about age 12 would be a good guideline if your child is interested in doing something like during the church hour. Just kind of ask around, find out who Sherry is if you're new to the church, and she can take the kids down during the church service and then bring them back up. They meet downstairs below the sanctuary. So just to give you an idea what's going on with that. So we're pretty excited about that. Well, tonight we're going to look into Revelation chapter 9. So we're moving right along with that too. We're going to see that two more of the seven trumpets of God's judgment will be sounding during this tribulation time. Now, back in Revelation chapter 8, 4 of the seven trumpets sounded. And at the conclusion of chapter 9 tonight, 6 trumpets will have sounded. And that will leave the 7th trumpet, the last trumpet, for chapter 11. And we'll see what happens when we get to that, hopefully next week. At the beginning of Revelation chapter 8, and just kind of a review here, the 7th seal of the 7-sealed scroll was opened. After a half hour of silence in heaven, 7 angels were each given a trumpet to sound in turn, and this would be the unfolding of more acts of judgment by God on the earth during the tribulation period. The point of this is to prepare the earth, and especially the Jewish nation, for their Messiah and for the Messianic rule and reign for 1,000 years. And so this judgment time has a kind of cleansing effect on the earth as Christ will return at the end of the 7 years. Now, each of these 7 trumpets will initiate a different judgment on the earth, and they sound in turn, right? We said that the trumpet judgments are sometimes called the 1/3 judgments because with different ones, 1/3 of various aspects or elements that are on earth are impacted by these trumpet judgments. So that's sometimes what they're called. The first trumpet judgment burned up 1/3 of the trees on earth. In the second trumpet judgment, 1/3 of the seas became blood, 1/3 of living things therefore in the seas died, and 1/3 of the ships on the seas were destroyed. At the sounding of the third trumpet judgment, a great star called wormwood fell on 1/3 of the waters of earth, making them bitter. And then the fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and 1/3 of the sun, 1/3 of the moon, and 1/3 of the stars were all darkened. So 4 trumpets have sounded, and there are 3 remaining. Chapter 8 closes this way. Verse 13, "And I looked, and I heard an angel flying through the midst of the heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the remaining blasts of the 3 angels who are about the blasts of the trumpets of the 3 angels who are about to sound." So, This angel proclaims 3 woes, one woe for each of the remaining trumpet. Of course, a woe is a heavy, burdensome, sorrowful thing that's going to happen. These trumpet judgments, there's 3 of them to go. And so we come now to Revelation chapter 9. Let's read the first verses, first section, 1 to 12. When the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star fallen from heaven to the earth. To him was given the key to the bottomless pit, and he opened the bottomless pit. And smoke arose out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace. So the sun and the air were darkened because of the smoke of the pit. Then out of the smoke locusts came upon the earth, and to them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. And they were commanded not to harm the grass of the earth, or any green thing, or any tree, but only those men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And they were not given authority to kill them, but to torment them for 5 months. Their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it strikes a man. In those days, men will seek death and will not find it. They will desire to die, and death will flee from them. Sounds pretty bad. The shape of the locusts was like horses prepared for battle. On their heads were crowns of something like gold, and their faces were like the faces of men. They had hair like women's hair, and their teeth like lions' teeth. And they had breastplates, like breastplates of iron. And the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots with many horses running into battle. They had tails like scorpions, and there were stings in their tails. Their power was to hurt men 5 months. And they had, as a king over them, the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in Greek he has the name Apollyon. One woe is past. Behold, still 2 more woes are coming after these things. So, in these 12 verses, so much is going on. There's so much detail. And so there are many questions that arise. We're going to go back through it one verse at a time. So we have the first verse there. Then the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fallen from heaven to the earth. And to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. So the 5th angel sounds the 5th trumpet of judgment. And immediately, an ominous scene unfolds before John, whom you might recall is watching all of this unfold from the heavenly realm perspective. He's in the throne room of God, and so he's seeing things from a heavenly perspective, and not a perspective from our reality. But what he sees is every bit as real, if not more so. So there is a star fallen from heaven to earth. Now, this star must be a person of some sort, because the text says that he is given a key, and it uses that personal pronoun there. I was reminded of the words of Jesus as he replied to his disciples in Luke chapter 10, verses 17 and 18, where they were talking to them. It says there, "And then the 70 returned with joy, saying, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name. And he said to them, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." Interesting side point, the number 70 often has to do with authority in the Bible. And these 70 disciples of Jesus are authorized for this short-term missions trip, so to speak, going out 2 by 2 to various places, and they come back with this report. The key thing for us is tying it into our verse in Revelation chapter 9, verse 1. Jesus says to them, the demons are subject in our name, and he says, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. So did the fall of Lucifer from heaven look something like a so-called falling star? Jesus seems to indicate that it may have appeared something like that. Although it was not physically manifested like a meteor plunging through our atmosphere, where particles of it are knocked off as the friction hits, and that's what creates the glowing tail. Not quite the same thing here. Likely Lucifer fell not within the physical realm so much as within that spiritual realm, that heavenly realm that's invisible to us under normal circumstances. So it could be that this star in Revelation 9:1 that has fallen actually has fallen within that very same spiritual realm. Wouldn't be visible to those within the earthly realm. Remember that John the Apostle is observing all of this from a heavenly perspective. He's seeing things from that viewpoint. If it is a person of a spiritual nature who has fallen, well, then it's reasonable to assume that this person is probably an angel of some kind. Okay? So we have that. In the language of the Bible, there is a connection between stars and angels. It's just the way the language works. Now, the stars that we can see in the night sky, of course, they're not actually angelic beings, right? Nonetheless, we get the sense that in the spiritual realm, in that unseen spiritual universe, angels may in some fashion be very similar to the stars of our physical universe. And I'm not entirely sure what I even mean when I say that. It might be a kind of brightness about them or that kind of thing, or they're scattered all over the place and they give that appearance like the physical stars do in our night sky. It might be something like that. I don't know. All I know is the Bible seems to use these concepts of stars and of angels interchangeably at times. For an example of this, just one example, let's check out Job 38, chapter 38, verses 4 through 7 here. God is talking to Job, and he says, "Job, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? To what were its foundations fastened? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together," there's the stars, "and all the sons of God shouted for joy." All right, here in here in Job 38, we see the sons of God are laid out comparable to the morning stars. This is a parallel structure in the Hebrew. And the sons of God are angelic beings. And they're called sons of God because they are direct creations of God. Adam was a direct creation of God. Eve was a direct creation of God. The rest of us have come into being through a process which God created. All right? And but angels, every one of them was created individually, and so they are called sons of God. In fact, Adam is also called a son of God for that very reason. See Luke chapter 3 on that. Anyhow, the morning stars sing, and the sons of God shout, so there's rejoicing in both things. Basically, they are essentially the same creatures created by God. But one question comes up that I have in respect to this fallen star in Revelation 9:1. Is this angel fallen in the sense of having become evil? Which the imagery there from Gustave Doré suggests, that illustration that you see on the screen. The verse sounds as though he was sent for the purpose, meaning Revelation 9:1, sounds as though he was sent for the purpose of opening up this bottomless pit because he was given the key. But does that necessarily mean that he must be a holy angel to be given that particular duty or task? Surely God could command a fallen, unholy angel to unlock the pit if he so desired. So I got to thinking about this, and I decided to check with an expert, a good commentator by the name of John Wolverd, to get some assistance with that question. Here's what he says. The star here mentioned, however, seems to refer to a person rather than to a literal star or meteor, as we said. The star is described as fallen in more accurate translations rather than falling, as indicated in the authorized version. So he's talking about the King James version there, which would have the word a star falling from heaven, I assume. So the word fall is in the perfect tense. All right, so he's talking about a little grammar there, which signifies completed action. The person referred to as the star is given the key of the bottomless pit, or the pit of the abyss, he says, as it is better translated. No explanation is offered in the passage itself concerning the identity of this person, but the occasion may be the aftermath of warfare in heaven mentioned in Revelation 12, 7 through 9, where the devil is cast out into the earth. He says this act of God that happens at the end of, or happens in Revelation 12, he says probably at the beginning of the Great Tribulation, terminates the ability of Satan to accuse the brethren in heaven as he has been doing through previous ages. The first verse of chapter 9 does not record the fall itself, but rather the star is seen as already fallen from heaven to earth. And then he says, it would seem likely, therefore, that the person referred to as the star is none other than Satan himself. So there's that. Lehman Strauss, another commentator whom I respect greatly, tends to agree with Walvoord here. He says, but who is the star? The tense, again he's talking about grammar now, the tense of the fallen in the Revised Version tells us that the star had already fallen from heaven. And John was not told when or how the star had fallen, but he was given to see that the star is an intelligent being, okay, to whom acts are ascribed, the giving of this key and the opening of the bottomless pit, which could not be said except of a living being. And Jesus said to the 70 disciples, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. And by this he meant, I feel certain, the fall of Lucifer from heaven, through which he became Satan. And he cites Isaiah 14, 12 to 15 there. How art thou fallen, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cast down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? And so on and so forth. And he said, Lucifer goes on to say, I will be like the Most High. He wants to be like God. So he goes on to say here, Lehman Strauss does, if we are interpreting Scripture reference with Scripture reference correctly, well, then there seems to be little doubt that the star is Satan, the great enemy of God and man, and that the references in Revelation, or the reference in Revelation 9:1 is to his original fall. So now he disagrees with Walvoord there. Walvoord said this is a fall that happens at the beginning of the tribulation, maybe, as Revelation 12 talks about. But Lehman Strauss goes for the original fall of Satan, as he cited with Isaiah chapter 14. And I tend to agree more with Lehman Strauss on this. It seems that Satan, even after he's fallen, seems to have access to heaven in some ways. And so anyway, that's another topic for another time. This star, but this is where commentators become very helpful for you. I like that they draw attention, both of them, to the word fallen, talking about this fallen star. The star, angelic being, is not presently falling. It's not the present tense. Rather, fallen serves as an adjective to the word star. Fallen is a verb form. So in the Greek, it is in the perfect tense, meaning that the action has already been completed, or perfected is another way of thinking of the perfect tense, at some point in the past. The star has fallen. And details like this really do help to clarify what's going on. The description fits Satan, who fell from heaven to earth at some point before this, depending on which one you want to go with, either Walvoord's view or Strauss's view there. Revelation 9:1, let's look at something else here. Then the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fallen from heaven to the earth. To him was given the key to the bottomless pit. Now that's an interesting phrase. This bottomless pit, Satan is given the key to the bottomless pit. So what is this bottomless pit now? A good translation of the word would be the abyss, which I believe Walvoord said in his notes there. The New Unger's Bible Dictionary, which is probably not as new as it used to be, describes the abyss like so. In the New Testament, the abyss is the abode of the imprisoned demons. And then he cites Revelation 9:1. This is an article on Abyss, and so he cites the verses that we're looking at for that reference, imprisoned demons, and we'll see what happens here in a little bit. At least many of the demons whom Jesus expelled in his earthly ministry were commanded to return to the abyss. Circumreference or cross-reference to Luke chapter 8 and verse 31. That's the passage where Jesus is casting a legion of demons out of a man on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and the Gadarenes or the Gerasenes, all the same place. But anyhow, and but these evil spirits dreaded to go there before their predetermined time. We don't want to be cast into there, and so Jesus casts them into the swine, right? And then the swine run into the lake and they drown. Myriads of demons. Oops, wait a minute, back it up, buddy. Myriads of demons will be let loose during this period of the tribulation to energize age-end apostasy and revolt against God and his Christ, but will be shut up again in this prison together with Satan at the second advent of Christ. Chapter 20, verses 1 to 3. The abyss is therefore to be distinguished from Sheol or hell or Hades, okay, the place of the dead. It's not that. So it's also to be distinguished from Tartarus, which has nothing to do with tartar sauce. I had fish tonight, tartar sauce on it, has nothing to do with Tartarus here, okay? Tartarus is a Greek word referring to a place in Greek mythology or their belief system of a very deep pit where by angels are or spirits are imprisoned, I suppose. Peter borrows that when he's writing his second letter by the guidance of the Holy Spirit, okay? And so in the New Testament, Tartarus is the prison abode of fallen angels, 2 Peter 2:4, the only place where the word Tartarus is used in the Greek New Testament. And the lake of fire is another place that's not going to be that either. So that's Revelation 19:20 and 20:10 and 21:8. Or the eternal abode of all wicked, unrepentant creatures, including Satan, angels, and men. This abyss is a very special place. That's the point. Separate from hell, separate from the lake of fire, and from yet another realm known as Tartarus, the prison abode of fallen angels. I wanted to highlight this for you this evening so you can understand something. There is so much more going on in that spiritual realm, that heavenly realm, than what we might suppose. We think it's just sort of straightforward because we base it on limited information we have. But the more you get into it in the Bible, the more you find out. In Revelation chapter 9, verse 2 now, Satan opens the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and smoke arose out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace. So the sun and the air were darkened because of the smoke of the pit. Now, about 8 years ago, when I first started working on this verse for a Bible study I was doing then, I watched some online videos of flocks of starlings, and just watching them stay in complete unison and as almost moving as one mind and flitting about, and thousands of them in some cases flying around in these big giant waves in the sky. Also looked up swarms of locusts and watched them. With this smoke billowing out of the pit, it certainly could be actual smoke in there. It's also not hard to imagine that the smoke could in reality and in part be the swarm of these demonic creatures that are then described for us in verse 3 here. Take a look at that. Then out of the smoke locusts came upon the earth, and to them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. In his notes on this passage, John MacArthur writes about these locusts. He says, these are not normal locusts, however, but specially prepared ones that are merely the outward form of demons, who, like locusts, will bring swarming desolation. That's the intent of this judgment. Perhaps you've seen the recent locust swarms in Africa. But as MacArthur says here, these locusts in Revelation 9, they're not typical bugs. These are demonic. It's worth reminding ourselves that in the midst of all of this talk about Satan and demons and everything, we're really discovering some things about God's judgment on the earth during the tribulation time. God is using demonism as a means of judgment here. Very fascinating to think about. God is able to override the demons and use them to his purposes and ends. Even if they think they're getting something of their own purpose accomplished, he's actually using them to accomplish it. Happens a lot in the Bible. So there's that. It's very interesting, and I thought maybe noting that would be worthwhile this evening. Lots of things that we're kind of learning here as we look at this. Next, take a notice here that there are servants of God who are on earth at this time, but they are protected from this demonic attack. Think about those who were sealed with the seal of God, the 144,000 back in Revelation chapter 5. Here in verse 4, they were commanded, these demons were commanded not to harm the grass of the earth, so there's restrictions that can be placed on, and they can't do certain things, or any green thing or any tree, but they were only to harm those men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. So the demons aren't permitted to harm the grass, the greenery, the trees, only human beings. And only those humans who do not have God's seal on their foreheads. This ought to give us some pause concerning the power of the demonic. Okay? We might not think that they can do much in this physical realm, but apparently that's not really the case at all. Okay? They can do things here, but only if they're permitted to do so. For example, Jesus allowed the demons. They begged him to be sent into the pigs, and he allowed them to enter the 2,000 pigs, which were then drowned. Mark talks about the number 2,000 in his account, I think in Mark 5. The same is true for their effect on human beings. They obviously can physically harm human beings. They can torment them, and apparently even kill people. But once again, only if they're permitted. And we see that in verse 5 here of Revelation 9. And they were not given authority to kill them, but to torment them for 5 months. Okay? Their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it strikes a man. And it's this repeated striking. I mean, what must it be like to be stung repeatedly to the point of experiencing torture and torment, and you're just unable to defeat the creatures that are causing you this pain? It really must be something that drives you crazy. Okay? Let's look here, verse 6. In those days, men will seek death and will not find it. They will desire to die. You know, I'd be better off dead right now than having to go through this. And death will flee from them. So that's sort of the impact of this judgment from this bottomless pit set loose by Satan himself upon the earth at God's direction. Okay? Very interesting. All right. John now gives a description of these strange demonic creatures. And even with the word pictures that he uses here, it's very difficult to picture them in our minds. Revelation 9, 7-10 says, "The shape of the locusts was like horses prepared for battle. On their heads were crowns of something like gold, and their faces were like the faces of men. They had hair like women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth. And they had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots with many horses running into battle. They had tails like scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months." They have this weird kind of hybrid style appearance, don't they? I mean, this part of them looks like something, this other part looks like something else, and this part over here reminds you of that other thing, and they sound like chariots when they're flying around, and so forth. John is doing his level best, and these things are moving. I imagine it's not like, could you please hold still so I can get a good picture of who you are? You know, John's doing his level best to convey what he's seeing here, but we still don't really get it. They fly, they have sharp teeth, they have stingers. I wonder, did the people see them, or was this some unseen entity that was attacking them? We don't know. We just know that they're being attacked and being hurt. And we now note that these bizarre demonic hybrid beings have a king over them. There's a ruler to this swarm, an angel, the angel of the bottomless pit. Verse 11 says, "And they had as king over them the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in Greek he has the name Apollyon." Apollyon. And Unger, in his Bible dictionary, defines for us Abaddon and Apollyon. He says that Abaddon, the Greek is Abaddon, and it means destruction. Okay, destruction. The angel of the bottomless pit, and I don't know what the G is there. It might have been a reference note that just got blown up as big as the other letters. That happens sometimes. But anyway, the angel of the bottomless pit, Revelation 9:11, and corresponding to Apollyon means destroyer. Okay, Apollyon is destroyer, Abaddon, destruction. They're related words, obviously, even though they're different languages. The word Abaddon means destruction in Job 31:12, or the place of destruction, in other words, Hades, or the region of the dead. Job 26:6, 28:22, and then Proverbs 15:11. Okay, destruction, destroyer. You can see parallels to Satan here. You know what I'm saying? There's things that are similar to Satan here, and it gets even more interesting to track this through pagan religion's history, which we're about to do right now. In his book Apollyon Rising, where he deals with the subject in depth, Thomas Horn, Dr. Thomas Horn, makes a connection between this Apollyon and the Greco-Roman god Apollo, the son of Zeus. Also, Zeus is also known as Jupiter. That's his Roman name. Apollo, in both Greek and Rome, has that name, Apollo. And now this quote that we're going to look at here, it gets a little long, okay? But I'm going to point out some highlights as we go. We're going to take this a little bit at a time so you can hopefully better follow what Pastor Horn is saying here. And I think that's very important with this as we look at it. So let's look at the start of it here. He says, to understand why such a fanciful prophecy about Apollo, or Apollyon, son of Jupiter, returning to earth, should be important to you. In ancient literature, Jupiter, who's pictured in the upper left there, was the Roman replacement of Yahweh. Okay? The Roman replacement of Yahweh. Yahweh would be the original God, right? He's the creator. And then other gods start showing up. And Jupiter is a replacement there as the greatest of gods. That's Yahweh, or rather Jupiter's, or Zeus's, as he's known in ancient Greece. That's his function, to be the one over all the gods. He's really a counter Yahweh, as Horn says it here. And his son, Apollo, also pictured there to the left on that slide, his son Apollo is a replacement of Jesus, a counter Jesus. The Antichrist, folks, the word Antichrist means in place of Christ. Okay? The Antichrist who will be revealed at the outset of the tribulation, okay, and not until then, he is a replacement Christ. He is a counter Christ. And it's the same idea with Apollo. See, there's a connection here. There's a connection between these. Keep in mind, understand, it is Satan who drives these ideas of the false pagan belief systems throughout history. Themes are going to repeat because we're dealing with the same evil spirits who fulfill these roles in Satan's plan. The spirit of Antichrist, which the Apostle John talks about in his first epistle, the spirit of Antichrist has been with us for millennia. Let's go back to see what Tom Horn continues to say here. This Apollo comes to rule the final new world order. When justice returns old Saturn's reign, or as it says in the brackets, Satan's also. Saturn and Satan are the same. The ancient goddess Justice, he says, who returns Satan's reign, Saturnia Regna, the pagan golden age, was known to the Egyptians as Ma'at and to the Greeks as Themis, while to the Romans she was Lustitia. So this Justice, this goddess of justice, also goes back through time. Egyptians, Greeks, and then the Romans, and on into the modern age. Justice returns old Satan's, or Saturn's rather, reign. That's a quote from the Roman poet Virgil, okay, who lived just a few decades before the birth of Christ. So the Roman god Saturn here is identified by many scholars with Satan, who deal with the Bible in a more direct way. And the final New World Order, this is Satan's attempt at his own kingdom. I will be like the Most High. And so wants to have his own kingdom on earth. And this is what the New World Order idea is all about, from its evil origins from long ago. Note that the goddess Justice, as we went through this part, has been here for ages. Horn continues to talk about this goddess. It's pretty important. Statues and reliefs of her adorn thousands of government buildings and courts around the world, especially in Washington, D.C., as familiar Lady Justice, blindfolded and holding scales and a sword. So you thought somebody just sort of came up with this as an icon or a logo for the idea of justice. There's a goddess involved, a pagan goddess. All right, so that's what you're looking at when you see this. She represents, he says, the enforcement of secular law. Okay, this has nothing to do with biblical law or biblical guidelines or ethics or morals or anything else like that. This is secular law, worldly law. Okay, and is, according to the Sibyl's Conjure, the authority that will require global compliance to the zenith of Satan's authority, concurrent with the coming of Apollo. So justice is going to require compliance to Satan's authority once the Antichrist or Apollo appears. This is what he's saying here. Okay? What's more, he says, the Bible's accuracy concerning this subject is alarming, including the idea that pagan justice will require surrender to a satanic system in a final world order under the rule of Jupiter's sun. Wow, that's an incredible thought, that pagan justice requires a surrender to a satanic system. All right? Think about this, folks. Think about the current cry for social justice in the midst of everything that we've seen happen just this year. All right? The prevailing idea is that we cannot have justice for all until we all surrender to the same state-mandated order on how to think, what words to use, etc., etc., etc. That's the only way to eliminate the systemic racism and create justice for all peoples, once everyone surrenders to that. So we already have these ideas planted into our system. Horn wrote this book years ago. All right, this is an old book. Perhaps 2020 has been a year to test us as a people, to see how willingly we will comply with mandates that are given, that are end runs around our constitutional republic, all right, and the representation. Thomas Horn goes on to say here, in the New Testament, the identity of the god Apollo, repeat coded in the Great Seal of the United States as the Masonic Messiah who returns to rule the earth, is the same spirit, verified by the same name, that will inhabit the political leader of the end times New World Order. All right, now he has this seal of the United States there, and he's talking about the identity of the one who is to come. Let's take a look at this real quick. Annuit Septus, okay? Annuit Septus means he approves our undertakings. And we might be tempted to think, oh, that means God. the God of the Bible, he's approving our undertakings. Annuit septus, that's what they're just putting that out there. Well, the phrase annuit septus actually is taken from the Roman poet Virgil, the pagan Roman poet Virgil that we just talked about a little bit ago, where he referred to Apollo's father Jupiter. He's talking about Jupiter. It is Jupiter who approves our undertakings, who approves what we are doing. Jupiter does this, not Yahweh. Okay? Novus Ordo Seclorum in the banner below the pyramid there means a new world order, which according to the seal on the dollar, Jupiter is the one who must be approving of our undertakings to establish this new world order. This is a pagan system with pagan justice in control and that sort of thing. Tom Horn goes on to say, according to a key prophecy in the book of 2 Thessalonians, the Antichrist will be the progeny or the incarnation of the ancient spirit Apollo. And he said, why is he saying that? Where does he get the proof for that? 2 Thessalonians 2:3 warns us, let no man deceive you by any means. For that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed. That's the Antichrist. Another name, the son of perdition. Perdition is Apoleia, or Apollyon, Apollo, the son of destruction. All right, would be a way. And so it's identifying the Antichrist with Apollo here. All right. Numerous scholarly and classical works identify Apollyon as the god Apollo. So here he's saying that both of these are the same. Apollo, Apollyon, the Greek deity of death and pestilence. You can see disease over there. Oh, you say, well, there's healing. Well, sure, if you're the god of disease and you start the disease first, you provide the healing, people are going to come to you, okay? He's the god who protects the flocks and cattle. He's the god of truth. Well, we'll see. Anyway. And Webster's dictionary points out that Apollyon was a common variant of Apollo until recent history. So they used to use the words or the names Apollyon and Apollo interchangeably in the literature, the ancient literature. That's what he's saying here. And he gives us an example of this. It's found in the classical play by the ancient Greek playwright Aeschylus. The Agamemnon of Aeschylus, in which Cassandra, pictured here, repeats more than once, Apollo, thou destroyer. O Apollo, Lord of fair streets, Apollyon to me. So there it's using Apollo and Apollyon together. And accordingly, the name Apollo turns up in ancient literature with the verb apollumi or apollio, to destroy. And scholars, including W.R.F. Browning, believe the Apostle Paul may have identified the god Apollo as the spirit of Antichrist operating behind the persecuting Roman Emperor Domitian, who wanted to be recognized as Apollo incarnate in his day. So this is Domitian's idea. I want to be represented as Apollo incarnate. This is really key to understanding the spirit of Antichrist that the Apostle John talks about in his first letter, namely that the spirit of Antichrist is already at work in our world. John says that, and it's still true today. Domitian wanted to be, as it says there, the destroyer incarnate. All right, that's what Apollo incarnate would mean, the destroyer in the flesh. And he's persecuting the Christians, all right, who won't bow down to him, right? Try to think of other national leaders in history who wanted to be the destroyer in the flesh. They wanted to upset the apple cart. They wanted to change things over radically. Revolution, right? That's the word. Let's have a revolution. Get this. Such identifying of Apollo with despots and the spirit of Antichrist is consistent even in modern history. For instance, note how Napoleon's name, Napoleon, it's in there, Napoleon, his name literally translates the true Apollo. Napoleon, the true Apollo. That was a name he chose for himself. There's Napoleon 1, 2, and 3 of these emperors, right, in France. And so that's a name he chose for himself, the true Apollo. Delusions of grandeur for a short guy. You know, that's kind of Napoleon's story. Revelation 17:8. This is the last part of Tom Horn's quote here. Directly ties the coming of Antichrist with Apollo, revealing that the beast shall ascend from the bottomless pit and enter him. The beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition, into Apolia, or into Apollo. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. So essentially, what Reverend Horn is outlining here is that the spirit of Apollyon, the spirit of Antichrist, the counter-Christ that will come to full fruition at the end of times, has been evident all the way throughout history, all the way back to ancient times. This spirit has been going on. Even back to the times when pagan peoples abandoned their creator and started to worship what he had created instead. This is what the Apostle Paul talks about in Romans chapter 1. Satan does not know when the end's going to come. So he has always had a plan in place. He's had a man in mind all the way through in case things should suddenly change. He's always had his system of evil rule in place, in position, ready to take over, so that should the opportunity ever arise on planet Earth, he would be ready to move in, and through his global leader that he establishes and his global spiritual evil leaders, he would set up then his world kingdom. In essence, what we have in this fifth trumpet judgment is a demonic hybrid locust horde assaulting humanity in torture and torment under the control of the spirit of Apollo and Apollyon. Imagine the confusion that results from that kind of pressure on people to constantly torment people. They can't think straight, they can't make good decisions, and then meanwhile you're moving your team in to take control of all things, okay? The destroyer, Apollyon, also known as the Antichrist, coming into power under those kind of circumstances. The Apostle John concludes this trumpet's assault, summing it up this way. He says in verse 12, "One woe is past. Behold, still two more woes are coming after these things." So, more woes to come. And that sounded pretty bad already. All right, so then we come to the sixth trumpet judgment, which finishes out Revelation chapter 9. First off, let's just listen to the account in full. All right, verses 13 to 21. "Then the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, Release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. So the four angels who had been prepared for the hour and day and month and year were released to kill a third of mankind." So there's another third gone. "Now the number of the army of the horsemen was 200 million. John says, I heard the number of them. And thus I saw the horses in the vision. Those who sat on them had breastplates of fiery red, hyacinth blue, and sulfur yellow, and the heads of the horses were like the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and brimstone. By these three plagues a third of mankind was killed, by the fire, and the smoke, and the brimstone, which came out of their mouths. For their power is in their mouth, and in their tails, for their tails are like serpents having heads, and with them they do harm." So it's not stingers this time, it's bites, right? "But the rest of mankind, who were not killed by these plagues, did not repent of the works of their hands, that they should not worship demons and idols of gold, silver, brass, stone, and wood, which can neither see nor hear nor walk. And they did not repent of their murders, or their sorceries, or their sexual immorality, or their thefts." All right, verse 13 there says that a voice comes from the altar of incense, which is before the throne. This is what starts this sixth trumpet judgment rolling. On its tabletop-like surface, you can see it here, the altar's design has a curved horn at each of the four corners. I don't think that's for hanging your napkin when you're sitting at the table, okay? Horns represent authority. And in a prayer relationship with God, which the altar, by the way, represents as prayer to God, God is the one who's the authority in that circumstance, right? So God's voice is the one speaking from the altar. And he's saying to this trumpeting angel, release the 4 angels bound in the river Euphrates. Now, we do not know specifically who these 4 angels are. That they have been bound tells me that they are fallen, evil angels. Whatever they've done in the past has kept them bound in that river. And since they are bound at the Euphrates, we could speculate that these 4 fallen angels were powerful beings that hearken back to the days of Babel, the Tower of Babel, way back, the beginnings of rebellious human civilization immediately following the flood. If so, they would also be from the time of the corporate rebellion of humankind at the Tower of Babel, these 4 angels present for that kind of thing. This is tempting because the rebellion at Babel certainly did involve idolatry. It involved the worship of false deities, the glorification of humanity, that we will enter into the heavens. This is precisely the same as worshiping demons, okay? And 4 is interesting with this. 4 also happens to be the number of the 4 beasts in Daniel 7, very key to the end times. We don't have time to expound on it in this study in Revelation, but we should get to it sometime. And then the 4 metals found in the great image of Daniel chapter 2. These are Gentile kingdoms that are unfolding till you come to this final kingdom, the final world order. All right. Daniel, of course, was geographically located near the Euphrates River in Babylon during the Babylonian captivity. That's where he was. And some would say that these 4 beasts and 4 metals are not demonic, but they're political entities. Well, I would say they could be both demonic and political. I think that happens all the time. These 4 angels may somehow be tied in with the political demonic forces that held sway back in this so-called cradle of civilization in the region of Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, right? That cradle of civilization. My questions are this: what exactly was born and then nurtured in that cradle there? In the ancient Sumer at Babel, what spiritually was born there? What began there? And who or what was it that birthed and nursed this evil newborn thing? All right? Whatever it may be assured it is spiritual evil to the core, and it's been with us all the way along. Now, Revelation 9:15 says, the 4 angels who had been prepared for the hour and day and month and year, they were released from the Euphrates to kill 1/3 of mankind. Wow. If these 4 evil beings had previous responsibilities or not, we can't really say. It doesn't say anything. But at the very least, since being bound at the Euphrates, they were made ready for a very specific time and purpose, for the very hour, of the very day, of the very month, and of the very year for this judgment to come on the earth. They were prepared and they were held in reserve by God to fulfill his purposes, especially at this moment in human history. John Walvoord writes, he says, the judgments here depicted, that of slaying the 3rd part of men, is one of the most devastating mentioned anywhere in the book of Revelation prior to the second coming. Earlier in the 4th seal, 1/4 of the earth's population was killed. Here, an additional 1/3 is marked out for slaughter. These 2 judgments alone account for half of the world's population. And it is clear that in addition to these judgments, there is widespread destruction of human life in other divine judgments contained in these seals, the trumpets, and then the vials, which we haven't gotten to yet. Okay. Never since Noah, Walvoord says, has such a substantial portion of the earth's population come under God's righteous judgment. The fact that the third part of the population of the world is killed is repeated in verse 18 then. You know, whenever I hear news commentators say a particular disaster is of biblical proportions, you know, this is like biblical proportions, this sounds like Armageddon, you know, I'm inclined to think they really don't have any idea what divine judgment within the parameters of true biblical proportion actually looks like. Okay, verse 16 says that the army unleashed to carry out this judgment is some 200 million strong. Only Congress understands a number like 200 million. I don't think they really do, but you know what I'm saying. John says that he heard that number, so meaning someone in the heavenly throne room mentioned that figure. It was tossed around there. So it's not a symbolic number of meaning a whole lot of beings. Now, 200 million, he heard the number. It's a real number. Let's just read verses 16 to 19 once again to get a feel for this. Now, the number of the army of the horsemen was 200 million. I heard the number of them, he says, and thus I saw the horses in the vision. Those who sat on them had breastplates of fiery red, hyacinth blue, and sulfur yellow, and the heads of the horses were like the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and brimstone, which seemed to match up to the colors of fiery red, hyacinth blue smoke, and sulfury yellow brimstone. All right? By these three plagues, a third of mankind was killed by the fire and the smoke and the brimstone which came out of their mouths. For their power is in their mouth and in their tails, for they have tails that are like serpents, having heads, and with them they do harm. Some have described this as a human army. Well, if it is, it's a demon-possessed human army. There's spiritual evil all over it and through it. A frightening idea in and of itself that there would be a demon-possessed army out there. I'm inclined to see this myself as an army of unseen creatures in that spiritual realm. 200 million entities strong, marching against the human population. You think about the legion of demons that one man had. Think about that and multiply it by a lot. Their fiery red, strange fire kills people. Their hyacinth blue smoke chokes people to death. Their sulfur yellow brimstone rains down fatally upon people. This is like Sodom and Gomorrah on a global scale. All right? Amazing to think that God would set these 4 Euphrates angels free from their prison and allow them to slaughter so many. Isn't it obvious that one means of divine judgment is to simply allow evil to run its course, allow the consequences to play out, powerfully demonstrating what those consequences of wickedness truly look like and what actually can happen when you sin against God and it's left unchecked? Little wonder that the Bible declares, "He who says there is no God is a total fool." They don't realize what they're undercutting and what they're undermining when they remove the basis for morality and ethics and how to treat people. It's the equivalent of being handed a cake knife for the cake at a child's birthday party, but rejecting that and idiotically choosing to use a chainsaw instead. I'm going to do it my own way. And we are like that as human beings. Listen, folks. Listen. Humble yourselves. Do it God's way, okay? I'm just saying. Wow. In this opening portion of the 7-year-long tribulation that we've been covering so far, half of the human population is destroyed by the seal and the trumpet judgments that have happened so far. And I bet the survivors of all this then have wisened up. You know, they've really gotten the message and they're ready to repent. Do you think? Not at all. See, they're just like the hard-hearted Pharaoh of Moses' Egypt. Let my people go that they may worship me in the desert. And he thinks about it, then he says, no, I'm not going to do it. You know, come on, man. This is a real God you're dealing with here. Revelation 9, 20 to 21. Look, just listen to this. All this happens. Half the population gone, everything. But the rest of mankind, who were not killed by these plagues, it didn't get me, did not repent of the works of their hands. And that they should not worship demons and idols of gold, silver, brass, stone, and wood, which can neither see nor hear nor walk. And they didn't repent of their murders, or their sorceries, or their sexual immorality, or their thefts. Notice these pitifully evil people choose to continue worshiping demonic powers and the material representations that those demonic entities use to entice people to be beholden to them. They snag you, snare you. Thus, the wicked survivors continue to destroy and murder their fellow human beings. They continue to practice their pharmakia. That's the Greek word for sorceries. Compare that to the modern term pharmaceutical companies, drug manufacturers. Sometime, take a few moments, not too many moments because it will overwhelm you if you do. Just take a few and start to think about how often you hear about drugs in your day-to-day life, in this culture and in this society. Don't judge any of it right or wrong. I'm not saying, that you shouldn't use medicines to get better or anything like that. I'm not saying any of that here, all right? So we're not talking about the drugs themselves or the right and wrong of it at all. That's not what I'm saying to do here. Just think about how much drugs factor in your life in one way or another, or how you hear about drugs in some way or other. Illegal drugs with drug runners and drug lords and drug money and drug overdoses and so on. But then there's the legal kind of drugs with drug reps and drug companies and drug insurance benefits and drug addiction to prescribed painkillers. These kind of things happen in our world all the time. And here's the thing. Sorcery. If I use this Greek word pharmakia, or sorceries as it's translated, and I pair that with supernatural evil, as this passage in Revelation 9 obviously does, well then what kind of power has actually been unleashed upon our contemporary culture, folks? What are we really dealing with? Evil people of a bad party? Evil people from a bad Marxist movement or something like that? Or is there something spiritually evil behind it all that we're really dealing with? We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, and the rulers of the darkness of this world and spiritual wickedness in high places. That's what we're dealing with, okay? Let's get the biblical perspective on these things. What kind of power would have its grip over you so much that even though half of your community, your neighborhood, and even your family were taken in by this thing, you still wouldn't want to give it up? You still wouldn't repent. Didn't get me. I'm okay. We're not even in the tribulation yet, but it's not really hard to see that the modern culture in which we live is well on its way, heading right for it. Well, I hope that you join us next week, okay, for Wow Live, as I'll attempt to cover both Revelation chapter 10 and chapter 11. I hope you're finding this rewarding and interesting, even as I am in preparing it and putting it together for you. God bless you guys. Take care. Have a great week.